So the bourgeoisie will have a lot more money than other groups within the third estate, and they will not really be satisfied with the nobles being exempt from taxation and the nobles having these privileges. And so many bourgeoisie people will want to change the French laws to have more political equality. In other words, so that there's not designations based on one's birth or based on one's rank, but designations are based on, or everyone is sort of treated equally, and the laws will apply to everyone. And because many of the bourgeoisie class are quite wealthy, they would benefit from, laws applying to everyone because they are able to educate their children and have good positions in society. And so getting rid of those laws that help the nobles would be beneficial. Okay, now Louis XVI is married to Marie Antoinette. Louis XVI takes over after Louis XV. Louis XVI inherits the debt that Louis XIV accrued in his wars, inherits the debt that Louis XV accrues in his wars, like the War of Austrian Succession and the 7 Years' War. And Louis XVI also decides then to intervene in the American War for Independence. And there he sends the French Navy to the North American continent, as well as some French military officials to help the North American colonial army of George Washington. And so the French will aid the American colonists in their fight for independence from Britain. This will add to the debt and will put the French government into a debt crisis. Now, it's important to know that there's a difference between the economy of France and the financial position of the French government. The economy of France is thriving to a large degree at the end of the 18th century. The 18th century has witnessed a large increase in international overseas trade. The Atlantic economy is booming, and so the French are participating in that, despite their losses in those mid-century wars to the British. And so the French economy is doing well. The government, however, is struggling to pay its debts, and a huge reason is because the government is unable to collect enough taxes. And part of the reason is because the nobles are exempt from that taxation. So, also, Louis XVI's wife is Marie Antoinette. She is an Austrian princess that was married to Louis to consummate the diplomatic revolution when France and Austria became allies between the War of Austrian Succession and the 7 Years' War. So go back to your last notes that we did and you'll remember that. And so basically that's a historic realignment of players in Europe. France and Austria, historic enemies. The Habsburg, Holy Roman Emperor, and the French king have long been at odds, but now they become allies against what they perceive to be a new threat, Prussia. Well, because Austria is historically an enemy of France, the Austrian princess is not well liked. She's viewed as a foreigner, and there's all sorts of stories about her extravagant spending and sort of her gossipy stories about love affairs and things like that that result in her being very unpopular amongst the French population. Okay, now the king, as we noted, is struggling because of these debts, largely from wars. And so it's not so much, Versailles that puts them into debt. It's really these wars that the French fought without having the ability to pay for. And so the king will attempt to have several financial ministers resolve these problems. One of those financial ministers is Cologne. And Cologne will propose a tax on the nobles, which will be rejected by the nobles. And another one will be, after Cologne is unable to do this, Brienne will be another one, another financial minister appointed by Louis XIV. Brienne will assemble a council of notables, or an assembly of notables, I forget which one it's called. But this assembly of notables will be of leading nobles as well as other societal officials, other government and people important in society. And he will try to get this assembly of notables to go along with his plan to tax the nobles. But the Parliament, the Assembly of Notables, does not accept it. And the Parliament of Paris rules that any taxation of the nobles must be approved by an Estates General. Remember, there's these regional parliaments or law courts in France that basically decide what laws will be followed within their regions. They're the ultimate sort of supreme courts throughout France. And so the Parliament of Paris is very influential, and it says no taxes. The king cannot tax without calling an Estates General. Now, what's an Estates General? An Estates General is a meeting of all the 3 estates of the entire country. In other words, it's like a parliament for France. Now, in England, Parliament and the king were at odds with one another. And so, in France, with the rise of absolutist kings, the king has not called Parliament or the Estates General into session. The king has ruled without the Estates General. And so we haven't seen an Estates General be called since the time of Louis XIV. Since as soon as he was increasing his power, he has not had to call an Estates General. It's been over a century since an Estates General has been called. So, when Louis XVI calls an Estates General in 1789, there's a lot of questions about, well, what's going to happen? What is this? And there's a lot of excitement about how this will offer an opportunity for change. Now, the excitement for change we really see amongst people in the Third Estate in these cahiers, or these lists of grievances. So the cahiers, the doléances, are these lists of grievances that are drafted by members of the Third Estate throughout France, and they will be sent to the king along with the delegates from the Third Estate that will go to Versailles. And who's drafting these lists of grievances, who's writing them, and who's going to be representing the Third Estate at the Estates General? Bourgeoisie. Exactly, the bourgeoisie, because they're the educated ones, and they're the ones with the money that they can leave their jobs and go and, you know, have this nice governmental session. So many lawyers will be going, as well as other representatives from the bourgeoisie. And one of those lawyers, one of those people that is going with ideas of reform is the Abbe Sieyes. And Abbe Sieyes is saying in his famous pamphlet, "What is the Third Estate?" He basically argues that the Third Estate is everything in France, and the Third Estate does not need the other 2 estates. And that in fact the other 2 estates, the clergy and the nobles, should not exist. They're in fact enchaining the Third Estate from reaching, and they're enchaining the Third Estate, and therefore France from reaching its full potential. So this idea of perhaps reforming the estate system we see even before the actual Estates General meets.